Welcome to The Achievers, where we find and elevate the stories of brilliant people. My name is Dex Hammond, and I'm going to be your host today. Today, I am joined by an incredible achiever, Kelley Ryder Goodwin. Kelley started her legal career at Colorado Legal Services, providing representation to low-income families. She then created her own legal firm and is now the founder of Untie the Knot. Kelley, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Dax. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been really excited to talk about Untie the Knot. It is such an interesting addition for you to make to everything you do. High level, what is it?
Yeah, high level, it's helping individuals who don't have a lawyer succeed at their divorce and custody case. Okay. In Colorado, I should say specifically in Colorado right now. But it's giving individuals the opportunity and the tools necessary to protect themselves and really their families.
Why might somebody be in that position? Why might they choose to do this without an attorney?
So there's a lot of reasons. I in my experience and thinking about this almost my entire career, about the huge gap that there is for individuals who can't pay for lawyers and those who can. So the first thought is money. It's expensive to hire an attorney. With that being said, certainly in Colorado, that's not what the numbers suggest. That's not the only reason why. There's a lot of other reasons, and I hate to sort of go into the other reasons because they look bad at lawyers, but it's the truth. So one of them is that lawyers will increase conflict, and I can tell you 100% that's true. Certainly not how I practice in my private practice and my law firm and how I did at Legal Aid. But there are definitely lawyers who purposefully increase conflict. Another reason is a lot of people think that their case isn't complicated or it's super amicable, which I hear a lot, and they don't need lawyers. And so they're going to give it a go. And they do. About 80% in Colorado don't have lawyers in their divorce and custody cases.
80%?
Yeah. And those are pre-COVID numbers. And those are also new cases. Those aren't cases that, for example, the minor child is still a minor and people go back to courts to change orders often. So that doesn't include that. So I could guess, just based on my experience, that actually modification of orders is actually higher than 80%. So it's a pretty significant number, and it's affecting a significant amount of our population for sure.
Wow. Do the courts make it easy, accessible for somebody to do these things themselves?
That's a great question. And one of the reasons why I actually really like practicing in Colorado. The short answer is that it's way more accessible than most states. We've had some really great judicial officers that have pushed that through. The reality, though, is they can't give you legal advice. So all of the forms in Colorado are free. And we actually, in Untie the Knot, push people to the judicial form because it's actually quite good. The website's really great. The forms are good. They're editable. So you can actually manipulate and edit them to what you need. And as a lawyer, we go to the judicial website to get our forms, because they update them, right? Mm-hmm. So from a form perspective, yes. From an information perspective, yes. But from a legal perspective, they actually can't give you any legal advice and can't even, for lack of a better term, forecast like, hey, this is what's going to sort of happen in your case. This is what you should sort of be thinking about. So that's really where Untie the Knot comes in, is to give you all the information that lawyers, for the most part, want you to pay for. And Untie the Knot helps you and facilitates the reality of you can do this without a lawyer. You can make decisions, sound legal decisions that are in your family's best interest, that you can't get really anyplace else, unfortunately.
When you talk about those people where it's such a high percentage of self-representation, is it usually both parties that are self-representing, or is it commonly a scenario where one will be lawyered up, for want of a better phrase, and then the other party's turning up unrepresented?
Generally speaking, if one party doesn't have a lawyer, neither does the other one. There's certainly exceptions to that, but it's probably about, and these are rough numbers, so it's about 75% are both not represented, and 25% one's represented and the other one isn't.
That's interesting. I've attended court a couple of times in Colorado, family court for a charity called CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. And what really surprised me about watching some of those cases unfold is the significant amount of activity that's happening in the court at any time, the speed that things are happening. I think I would, if I ever found myself in that situation, I think that alone and the unfamiliarity of it would make trying to self-represent very difficult.
Yes, it is truly a different environment. So you talk about speed, and there's language, there's procedure, there is different, you talk differently, you dress differently. There is a cadence and a procedure that is different, unlike any place else ever, right? I mean, sometimes I talk about this in regards to comparing it to prison. I've never been to prison. My understanding from television, right? Television movies and reading and like articles, stuff like that, is that, I mean, they have their own code, right? And that's why we see a lot of individuals who have been in that almost institutionalized, and it's so hard for them to get back into the world that you and I are accustomed to. So in a less extreme example, that's what court is. Again, it's a different language. It's a different process. You don't do anything that you would do in court outside, and vice versa. Like it's a different experience. And Untie the Knot, and we can go more into this. Not everybody goes to court. I also just want to say that too. However, through Untie the Knot, there is a specific, class, episode, chapters, like however it's specific about hearings. So it's just about how to represent yourself in court, and stuff that people forget about is you have to prepare for court. So it's how do you prepare for court? How do you build witnesses and exhibits and your case and all that stuff? So when you get into court, you can talk the talk and walk the walk, and you've done all the preparation that good lawyers do to then prepare or present, excuse me. So you've done all the preparation so you can present.
Important caveat, good lawyers. I'm curious about what are some of the consequences? What are some of the negatives when people self-represent, so they don't have an attorney or they don't have something like Untie the Knot to guide them?
The biggest consequence is agreements that are reached, because again, most cases don't go to court. So the parties reach an agreement, and there's a whole other kind of discussion about that. And we talk specifically about mediation in Untie the Knot. There's a whole section of materials to maximize that opportunity. And so because in Colorado, most, if not all, cases are ordered to mediation, agreements are reached there. And individuals don't understand the consequences of what they're agreeing to. So they don't understand what they're waiving, or how do I change this in the future? Like a great example is decision-making, and how there can be major decisions that a party might agree to not be part of that decision-making process. And then the other parent makes a decision that they are not okay with. So it's really understanding the consequences of what they're agreeing to and how to change it, and what to include. So I'm going to throw numbers out. So for example, it's not uncommon that people think they need to talk about 5 things, but in your average divorce and custody case, there's 105 things that we should talk about. And the best orders, the best agreements are those that are complete, so nothing's missing, It's not ambiguous. So ambiguous is another term for gray. It's not clear, right? Or there's not a consequence. Mm-hmm. And so when those agreements are missing those things, then the parties are stuck with what to do. And that creates conflict, and conflict, affects you personally, but also affects the kids. And then they have to go back to the court system, which honestly is not a quick process. And it just, and then we can talk about trickle down effect, about stress and all that stuff. So that's the biggest risk, is you're agreeing to something you don't understand, and you forget stuff, and you also make assumptions. I can go in a lot of stories about that. Mm-hmm. I always love to hear, like, my neighbor did her divorce by herself and it's been fine, or it is fine. Well, she believes it is, mm-hmm. right? The neighbor thinks it's fine, but she has no idea what's going on. And it's sort of just the blind leading the blind a little bit.
It's almost like, I've seen several divorce agreements. I've been divorced once. It almost leaves you with a playbook, right, for both mm-hmm. parties to understand what is the expected way to behave, how certain scenarios will play out. And I suppose that's another consequence. You're just not left with that playbook, that guide for both of you that you can reference and look up certain circumstances.
And you reference it a little bit. There's a lot of, quote, expectations. Like, mm-hmm. I expect the court's going to work this way. And that's also what Untie the Knot talks about, is expectations, not just of yourself as a party, but the other party, of the court, so that we're really level setting and we're really talking the truth, because the internet is wonderful and it's vast, and there's a lot of anecdotal things on the internet that just aren't true about divorce and custody cases. And unfortunately, people make decisions based on bad and wrong information. And Untie the Knot gives you the information. I mean, mm-hmm. It is the only online system that's for Colorado, in Colorado, made by Colorado. And it really does. I mean, I sort of hate to use this word, but I don't know that there's a better one. It teaches you how to do it and how to succeed. Right.
Yeah, I think I've always seen Untie the Knot, when we've talked about it, as if I was in that circumstances, I think I would sort of visualize it to myself as you're having somebody walking through the process with you, right? You sort of have this guide who at every step of the process you can go to. And of course, in some of the videos I've seen, a lot of it's you talking just like this face to face. So people will be familiar already. And I can imagine what would happen is you'd get to a certain step in the process. You have to do this. You have to find these forms. You've got to fill them in. You've got to think about these things. And there you are on video saying, all right, this is what you need to know. This is how you need to do it. This is what goes in the form. These are all the things you should think about before you agree to it. So having that guide going through the process with you seems really smart.
And there's so many, to use your last word, there's so many guides, there's checklists, there's workbooks that every individual who is part of the Untie the Knot community gets. The other great thing too is a lot of times there's not access. So you can watch as an individual with using Untie the Knot, the videos over and over again. Mm. And you can go back to the references and really work through your situation, which is very much what a lawyer does, right? A lawyer really talks to that client. Every case is different. Every family is different. And so you really have got to get to know your client. And that's a lot of what Untie the Knot does. Some of the videos, particularly when we talk about just how to complete the form. So you asked me earlier, like, about access. And sure, the forms are accessible, but do you know how to complete them? Right? Because back to the discussion about a whole different environment. So in Untie the Knot, there is very practical stuff like this is how you complete it. And then there's also very personal, I hate to use the word existential, but that's what comes to mind. But there's a whole exercise about thinking about your future and what do you want? And how do you get there? And how does the decisions that you make right now affect your future? So it isn't just practical stuff, which is almost what everybody else on the market does right now, which is fill in the forms. But it's also, how do you make decisions? How do you make decisions for your future? How do you really work through your priorities? What do you care about and what do you not care about? And how does that affect the decisions you make, both in your agreements and potentially representing yourself in court?
There's two, I think, really interesting points you raised there. One, the idea of priority is important because somebody might go into this process wishing, maybe even thinking it's going to happen, where all of the things they want are things they're going to get. And of course, in most cases, the other party is going to want something different or want to get something different. And so that becomes a negotiation, a back and forth. And if you don't have your priorities in place, you don't know which are the things you're really wanting to dig your heels in on versus those things you might be prepared to let go. And even that section of it, of helping people understand that, I think will give people an education, for want of a better phrase, of the basics of negotiation going into what will quite arguably probably be one of the most important negotiations of their entire life.
Yes. So priorities has to do with expectations. And in Untie the Knot, we actually talk about what are common or typical results and what the law says. So when you make your priorities, you being us, everybody. So when a party makes their priorities, a lot of times your priorities are based on your expectations of what you think's going to happen or what you think is not going to happen. So making priorities requires that you understand and appreciate and then can apply, right? Applied for success, the legal concepts of what can the judge even do? This isn't even on the table. I mean, so many times I talk to people and it's blah, 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 100%. It's actually, that's not right. Right. And so then I delicately walk that discussion, but, you have to make your priorities of things that can actually happen.
Right.
And so Untie the Knot helps you do that. And we have a whole, so much literature and walking you through how to do it with guidebooks. And then we talk about, to your point, we got a list of 10. You're going to have to understand, you might have to give up 10, 9, 8, and 7 to get 1 and 2. And the more prepared you are and the more calm, rational thought you've put to that, when you're presented a proposal or an offer or settlement or agreement, whatever word you want to use, you've put the time and the thought and the smarts to actually reply and actually be super smart about your reply, which nothing else does that except for a lawyer, or good lawyers, I should say. Not even good lawyers do that, but not all lawyers do that.
No, I think that's another great point, because in any back and forth, you never want to walk into a situation where you have an assumption or you have a data point that then the other side can easily demonstrate is incorrect, right? Because you're immediately then going to be on the back foot. So going through those exercises, figuring out, you can start with what your initial thoughts on priorities are. Untie the Knot then teaches you which of those are even real, feasible, ever going to happen. You can reassess your own priorities and then go back into the process. And you said something else earlier that I thought was important that I've never considered up until this point, which was, you're right that you can go back to these videos as often as you want. I've had meetings with lawyers for all sorts of things throughout my life and career. And sometimes you do leave, right? You've absorbed as much as you could, but you leave thinking, oh, what did they say about that point? Right now I'm forgetting how I do this next step that they're asking me to take. This is on video. You're talking direct to them. They can come back and see you as often as they want.
And that also brings up another point, which is sort of why I was scribbling. Another amazing point that ties into all of this that we haven't really touched yet on is the emotions. So one of the benefits of Untie the Knot is that you have someone in your corner, and it's gives you the confidence to know that you're making smart choices. Divorce and custody cases, separations, so whatever we want to call it, is a grieving process. You're going to go through the 6 stages of grief, even if it's 100% the right choice for you, your family, what have you. It is a hard process. And science tells us and talks about how our brain works in different emotions in high stress. The reality is our brain doesn't work really well. And through Untie the Knot, we give you this information, and back to another discussion about rewatching the tapes is you can, on your own time, absorb this information when you are at your best, right? So like, for example, if you have to watch something 6 times because the first time you got it, you got 2 of 6, like one sliver, and then you keep building on it. And in this process, it's really emotional. And when you know the information and you have given the time and the effort to make those right decisions, when you're in a highly emotional state, you can go back to like your notes, your decisions, your priorities, and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to just pause. I know what I'm going to do here because I had Untie the Knot, versus going in a tizzy and potentially making a decision that you're going to regret because you made it from an emotional place, not a less emotional or a more rational place.
Tizzy is a great word. Any opportunity to use that in life, you should use it.
I thought you would like it. I feel like it's a very British word. I don't know if that's true.
It might be, actually.
I feel like it has that like character about it.
I think it used to be a soda back in England as well when I was a child.
Oh, well, let's go with that. Like, so we should do tizzies and like, what else is very British? Pims or something. Gin.
Tizzies, gins, and Pims. I mean, that's a night.
That's a great podcast name.
Right. So that is an interesting idea that some of the things people will hear, whether it be from their attorney, be from their neighbor, be from Untie the Knot, some of the things of just hearing them are going to create an emotional reaction, even if they weren't having an emotional reaction to it, because it could be frightening to suddenly find out the very idea you have for custody in your mind doesn't even exist. So to be able to suddenly just pause, take a minute, go walk around the block or go have a good cry for a few minutes and then come back, right, in a place where you can then digest it. That's really interesting. I'm almost beginning to feel that even if somebody has an attorney, they still also need Untie the Knot because they can still absorb better information and probably use their attorney better.
Yes, which is such a great point. An attorney, and I'm going to say this just because I am one, attorneys should be there for their clients. They should not have a dog in the fight. And they should want their client to make the most informed decisions possible, irrespective of what the outcome is, because at the end of the day, remember, we don't have a dog in the fight, or we shouldn't. I, as a lawyer, just want to make sure you understand your agreement and ask good questions, ask complete questions, and untie the knot, because Untie the Knot is 100% for the party, right? We are the definition of not a dog in the fight, except for that I want you to succeed in your divorce and your custody case. So I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you what you might need. Now, well, let me say that I can't give you everything. I would love to say that because that's just not possible. But I'm going to give you the most important things that touch the most stuff, right? So so Untie the Knot very much is the law in Colorado, taught by an experienced family law lawyer that has seen a lot of things in public and private practice all over the map.
Let's dive into the specifics for a minute. So what's the Untie the Knot experience?
Untie the Knot experience is tailor-made to the specific person, meaning there's a lot of flexibility in it. So not every person needs the big 4 categories of a case. So you're able to get what you need. And certainly you might, if you need more than one thing or 2 things, and there's a package, right, to get what you need. And then there's things to a la carte or add on as you need them. And then every big section has very different chapters, and we call them modules. And within the module, there are different chapters that really break it down. There are video, there's supporting materials like checklists, guides, workbooks, things like that, to help supplement what you're seeing in the videos. And we also have a very active Facebook group in which it's a private group, and we bring in outside experts to talk about things that are tangential and accompanying divorce and custody cases, like real estate issues, like if we have to sell a house, or estate and trust issues about changing a will or powers of attorney, or financial situations about what do you now do now that your finances are separate. And then other things that people necessarily don't think about, like childcare. They talk, or career counseling, right? A lot of times you're going to have to, or you choose to get a different job. So there's a lot of things that come with that. That's in the Facebook group as well. We also have Ask Me Anything's calls, which is a lawyer of Untie the Knot. And these happen monthly, and they're taped, and they also are done live as well, where you hop on and they're anonymous, and you submit your question and you get an answer in real time. Also, we provide a 20-minute coaching call with an attorney with Untie the Knot to talk about your specific case and maybe some kind of hiccups and stuff, whatever stage you're in. Again, there's multiple stages. And so that can help you and put you in the right direction. There's additional stuff that we're adding all the time, and it really is trying to fully support you. And one of the biggest changes, and one of the biggest, most stressful times in any person's life to go through any type of separation.
Wow, there's so much more to it than I was even aware of. The coaching calls are a great idea. That ability for somebody to submit a question and hear from a lawyer is great. What sort of successes have you seen from this?
I honestly, and this is going to sound a little cliche. I mean, honestly, it's when people say, I'm so glad I did this. Mm-hmm. I was going to do X, and through Untie the Knot, to our earlier discussion, I was never going to get it. And Untie the Knot taught me the ways to succeed with what I could get. And that I think is the biggest. And that's, I'm paraphrasing a lot of different things, but that's probably the biggest thing that we hear is really people making smart choices, and they're proud of themselves. They're happy. They feel like their kids are protected and safe, and that they actually have a plan for their future. When at the beginning they were very scared and didn't know what was going to happen. You're
talking literal life-changing benefits, and anything that if you're going to have to go through this process that ends up with a better situation for the kids is a wonderful thing. I think what you've created is remarkable, and I think it's going to help tens of thousands of people and families across Colorado. Where can people find Untie the Knot?
So Untie the Knot is on the internet. So it's Untie the Knot CO for Colorado.com. We also have a public Facebook page, a public Instagram. There's really great content on that as well. We also have a YouTube channel that provides like little how-to tips and tricks there as well. So even if you don't choose, and I hope that you do, someone doesn't purchase Untie the Knot, the value that's in all these different places is still really important, because at the end of the day, I just want people to make I want people to make the best choices that they can for their life and their kids. And so we give a lot of information and value out in a lot of different places.
It's great. Kelley, you've been a remarkable achiever throughout your career, and I think Untie the Knot's an absolutely fantastic move. I would say for anybody who is facing a divorce or custody type scenario, as you heard today, whether you're choosing self-representation, whether you're in a circumstance where you're forced into self-representation, or even if you have an attorney and just really want to be more prepared, have reference material that you can go to in your own time, therefore use your attorney in a smarter way, then untiethenotco.com. Kelley, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.